Hello guys, it's Karen here. In this video, I'm going to rip apart Anita Sarkeesian's third video about the damsel in distress trope. You might have heard many of these responses before on my two previous videos, but that's because Anita has a tendency to use the same arguments over and over again. Anyway, here we go, and I hope you'll enjoy.
Welcome to the third episode in our multi-part series exploring the roles and representations of women in video games. This project examines the tropes, plot devices, and patterns most commonly associated with women in gaming from a systemic, big-picture perspective.
From a systemic big-picture perspective? More like a systemic narrow-minded perspective that focuses on your feminist agenda more than the actual video game characters.
Are there games starring heroic women who must go on a quest to save a dude in distress? Well, yes, they do exist. However, since female protagonists starring in their own games are already few and far between, adventures in which women work to save men in peril are extremely rare.
But they do exist, don't they? And besides, the majority of the audience video games are marketed towards are male. And I don't know about you, Anita, but personally I believe it's easier to relate to a character of your own gender, so it makes perfect sense there are fewer games with a female lead.
Back in our first episode, I mentioned that Princess Peach is the star of exactly one platformer. The premise is a simple inversion of the standard franchise formula, with Bowser abducting Mario and Luigi, while Peach is tasked with their rescue this time. So finally, after being kidnapped in 13 separate Super Mario games, Peach gets to be the hero for once.
But that's a good thing, right? Or do you think this is sexist somehow as well? I bet you do. Please elaborate.
But don't get too excited, because everything else about the game ends up in a train wreck of gendered stereotypes.
Ha! I knew it. You're never happy about anything, are you?
Nintendo introduced a new gameplay mechanic for Peach where the player can choose from 4 special powers, or vibes as they're called. And you know what those powers are? Her mood swings.
I think this mechanic is genius, and when it comes down to it, women express their emotions more than men. In this game, Peach's emotions and mood swings have been exaggerated on purpose to make her abilities more powerful. Or maybe she's just crying because she knows someday a mean feminist lady would reduce her feminine traits to a severe case of PMS.
In one of my favorite games of all time, Beyond Good and Evil.
One of your favorite games of all time? You mean your favorite out of, 10 games you've ever played? Give me a break.
So what is the difference between traditional narratives that place female characters in powerless positions and stories in which a male character requires rescuing by a woman? On the surface, the dude in distress and the damsel in distress may appear similar.
Well, that's because they are the exact same thing.
However, they're not actually equivalent. To understand why they're different, we need to examine the broader historical and cultural implications of the two plot devices.
Oh, you mean we have to apply feminist propaganda to it? Alright, I'm ready, let's go.
First, there's been no shortage of men in leading or heroic roles in video games, or in any other creative medium for that matter.
And that would be because the target audience is mostly male and it's easier to relate to... Oh wait, I already explained this before, go on.
Damsel female characters tend to reinforce pre-existing regressive notions about women as a group being weak or in need of protection because of their gender.
That's true though, isn't it? On average, women are weaker than men, and thus they might sometimes need a helping hand. It's just logical.
While stories with the occasional helpless male character do not perpetuate anything negative about men as a group, since there's no long-standing stereotype of men being weak or incapable because of their gender.
Just a funny thought. Have you ever heard an antagonist kidnap a female character just because they're a woman? Does anyone go, "This is just a woman, she's so weak and useless and feminine, she's so easy to kidnap"? I don't think so. That's not a real motive for a kidnapping. The motivation that leads to a female character being kidnapped is never her gender. Usually they get kidnapped because they possess amazing powers no one else does, like Zelda, Yorda, or Yuna. Or they're so badass they might ruin the antagonist's plans, so they have to be taken down, like Lara Croft or Faith. And I'm not even going to mention all the Disney princesses in Kingdom Hearts who have been kidnapped because of the powers they possess, not because they're women.
The 2012 HD remake of the game for Xbox Live again features the stock character Damsel, complete with newly upgraded boob jiggle. However, this time an option was added to the menu that allows players to select a replacement for the default woman in peril, by switching to either a Chippendale-style hunk or a dog instead. Setting aside the fact that if a female character is easily interchangeable with a dog, then it's probably a pretty good indication that something is wrong.
What, you hate dogs now too? No, but seriously, Spelunky as a game is a lighthearted adventure that makes fun of the damsel trope. You're in far too deep to see that, Anita. Never go full feminazi.
This is still a problem.
No. People like you are still the problem.
In recent years, we've also seen a number of news stories about fans who've taken it upon themselves to switch the gender roles in classic-era games by manipulating the code. This practice of gender hacking game ROMs has actually been around for decades, offering enterprising players the chance to play as a female version of Mega Man or as Princess Peach rescuing Mario with her mermaid power. And thanks to the internet, game mods and emulators are now much more widely accessible.
If you ask me, I don't mind the possibility of choosing a gender you want to play as. But it shouldn't be a problem if the developers want to create a character for their game series and have decided on the gender, be it male or female. What you seem to ignore, Anita, are the many games where you get to choose your character's gender. For example, the Dark Souls series, the Elder Scrolls series, the Dragon Age series, Blade and Soul, Terra, the Diablo series, The Sims, Overwatch, League of Legends, and last, but definitely not least, Mass Effect. It doesn't matter which gender you play as, since it doesn't change the core gameplay at all. If gender is such a big deal to you, why do you never mention any of these games, Anita?
Over the past several years, we've seen an explosion of independent development, with many new titles drawing inspiration from classic-era games. This is an exciting and vibrant trend with enormous potential for innovation. But have games produced outside of the mainstream studio system managed to break the gender mold and avoid damseling?
What I would ask instead is, have these games managed to bring something new and creative to the gaming industry? Something that the huge gaming companies could never think of, as they're too focused on their branding, afraid to break the mold. That's the main thing about gaming, Anita. Gameplay, story, music, and innovation, not gender.
Indeed, many of these new titles essentially function as love letters to the trope, as a way of paying homage to classic games of years gone by.
The thing is, everyone knows it's a stereotype, and these games are meant to make you have fun and laugh. Stereotypes are entertaining, and the references to old games are gold when you're making your own version of the classic.
This approach is no doubt intended as a kind of shallow meta-commentary on the tired old convention, suggesting developers are only employing the trope because the games that inspired them did so.
See? You get it after all, right?
But this type of ironic self-awareness does not challenge or disrupt what the damsel in distress trope says about the role of women in such narratives. Fat Princess, Horde, Dokuro, and the aforementioned Spelunky all include patronizing damsel jokes built right into the gameplay mechanics, which turn damseled characters into very literal objects, instead of just narrative ones.
Oh my god, no, my head is going to explode. There's the objectification thing again, Anita. We've been over this for so many times.
In Spelunky, the damsel can be knocked out, picked up, carried around, and thrown at enemies, before rewarding the player with an extra heart via a smooch of victory.
See? It's funny! Oh wait, I forgot you think games dictate reality, and so it is okay for people to throw knocked out women around to kill enemies. How terrible! How disturbing! Hashtag, games make us think it is okay to knock out and abuse women, so let's ban all games.
Sometimes this type of self-referential humor is referred to as ironic sexism. It's the I know, that I know, this is sexist, wherein the underlying assumption on the part of media makers seems to be that as long as a sexism is overt, obvious, or over the top, then it somehow loses its cultural power and is suddenly no longer a problem.
It's comedy. It's funny. It's not serious. It's making fun of sexism and the tropes and stereotypes that come with it. But of course you're not gonna be okay with it. If you were, you would lose your job.
Ironic sexism is dependent upon the false assumption that people no longer really hold retrograde sexist beliefs.
Yeah, you're the only one who does, darling.
Words like parody and satire are often thrown around to describe or defend these comedic depictions of yet more helpless female characters.
Exactly, because sexism doesn't exist as a social construct anymore, no matter what you may think, so it's not only logical but also funny to parody and ridicule that very idea.
But a simple wink and nod to the audience acknowledging a sexist trope, while actively reproducing that trope, does not automatically grant a free pass to continue exploiting the trope.
Why not? Everyone knows it's a joke. In a video game. Jokes and video games do not hurt people.
More often than not, the ironic humor is just an excuse used by developers as a way to try and have their cake and eat it too, so to speak. They want to use the trope, but not be held accountable for the inherent negative gender implications that come with it.
Again, no. It's still just a joke. Get over yourself.
Incidentally, a few games might have the option to play as a woman in multi-character lineups. However, these types of token role reversals do absolutely nothing to diminish the issues inherent in using the trope in the first place.
I have nothing left to say, Anita. You've been repeating these same illogical arguments over the course of 3 whole videos now, and you bring nothing new or exciting to the table. How many times do I have to tell you that video games do not dictate human behavior? I think I've mentioned it like 5 times before, and since all your arguments rely on that ridiculous assumption that video games cause sexism, there's nothing more I can tell you. Video games do not cause sexism. They do not endorse domestic abuse. They do not make people violent. I don't think I need to say anything else to disprove all the arguments you throw at us in your videos, so I'm just gonna continue making fun of you for the rest of this video.
Now, of course, some of the games we've been discussing may also be well made or super fun to play.
Well, how the fuck would you know since you're not a gamer?
Games like Sword and Sorcery, Where's My Heart, and Fez are all beautiful and creative retro-style games that appeal to a sense of nostalgia without replicating or falling back on the damsel in distress.
So, in your opinion, we should only be allowed to play these games that have non-gendered protagonists and stop producing any other kind of games? If we did that though, you'd still find something to complain about, I'm sure.
In the 1994 platformer Earthworm Jim, the woman in peril waiting at the end of the game is officially called Princess What's-Her-Name, a reference meant to humorously acknowledge the fact that many damsel characters in classic-era titles were so unimportant that they either remained unnamed or were otherwise entirely unmemorable.
I for one think that's pretty funny. Oh shit, I forgot that you don't have a sense of humor, Anita. Carry on.
So, the developers of Earthworm Jim noticed that sexist trend, thought it was hilarious, and proceeded to make another game in which a woman is completely unimportant. To add insult to injury, when Jim finally reaches Princess What's-Her-Name and is preparing to collect his reward, she is randomly killed by a falling cow.
Oh my god, that's amazing. I never thought that was a possibility. I feel so bad for you, Anita. Feminism has destroyed your brain to a point where you can no longer enjoy a good joke. I can assure you, though, this one is hilarious.
In each case, the joke derives from the fact that after completing the long and perilous journey to save his woman...
Let me stop you there for a second. Did you just say his woman? Who told you the princess belonged to the hero? I think you just assumed that in your sexist, misogynistic brain, Anita.
These titles may be attempting to make fun of gaming conventions like the heroic rescue or the smooch at victory, but they don't fundamentally change, challenge, or subvert the damsel in distress trope itself. The damseled women remain as disempowered as ever.
Help me!
So fucking what? It's a game, just play it, enjoy it, and shut up. It doesn't make real women any less empowered, unless they take what you say to heart and start believing in the patriarchal victim society you so desperately want to be a reality. You just want to play the victim and get everything for free because you're so oppressed. Grow a backbone and don't make your gender into a victim card that you can toss in at every single conversation.
Now, some will no doubt contend that jokes have no cultural power or significance and should just not be taken seriously.
Well, I don't take you seriously, and you're a huge joke, so I agree with you on this one. Oh wait, that's the opposite of what you just said, isn't it? Whatever, you're a joke.
This is nothing new. Making light of and dismissing gender issues is a sad, time-honored tradition. But I would argue that this reaction fundamentally misunderstands how humor functions.
No, I think you misunderstand how humor functions.
Both of these games offer some interesting commentary on the heroic rescue formula. Monkey Island asks, what if the damsel is perfectly capable of orchestrating her own escape, and attempts to rescue her just make things worse? Braid asks, in part, what if by trying to save the damsel, it actually makes you the villain?
Hey look, we have something else to choose from, awesome! But that doesn't mean every single game should be like this, now does it? Just embrace the possibilities of all kinds of different games for all kinds of people. There's something for everyone, even for a close-minded, dried-up cunt like you. Oh, sorry, did I use the C word? Well, I think it's a beautiful word and not sexist at all. I think it's actually quite empowering. Cunt, 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 cunt. See, I feel like a feminist already.
A true subversion of the trope would need to star the damsel as the main playable character. It would have to be her story. Sadly, there are very few games that really explore this idea, so as a way to illustrate how a deconstruction could work, let's try a thought experiment to see if we can create a hypothetical game concept of our own.
A feminist game concept? Like the Depression Quest? Please do show us your ultimate feminist creation. This is my favorite review of the Depression Quest, by the way.
Like many fairy tales, this story begins once upon a time with the kidnapping of a princess. She dutifully waits for a handsome hero to arrive and rescue her. Eventually, however, she grows tired of the damseling and decides it's high time she saves herself. Of course, if she's going to be the protagonist of this particular adventure, she's going to need to acquire a slightly more practical outfit.
So your solution to sexist games is to just create more violent games? But I thought you said you didn't like violent games. When did you change your mind, Anita?
She makes her way through the final castle to confront the villainous council and abolish the monarchy forever.
Monarchy? I thought you wanted to fight against patriarchy. I'm confused. Also, this sounds an awful lot like a game I've heard of before. What is it? Oh yeah, the Dreamfall game series. That doesn't have just one, but two awesome female protagonists. It sounds a bit like your little imaginary game project, except it's a lot better and it's actually real.
But instead of being made into the goal for a male protagonist, she uses her intelligence, creativity, wit, and strength to engineer her own escape, and then become the star of her own adventure.
I wonder, who else have escaped and become a star of their own adventure? Let me see. Well, Fiona from Haunting Ground, for example. She got 3, and depending how you play the game, possibly all 4 of her captors killed while making her escape. And Lara Croft, who's been imprisoned by the villains countless of times, has always managed to escape. And don't get me started on Samus, Bayonetta, Ciri, Mithra, and countless others.
Now, I'm certainly not arguing that all stories must include completely fearless, hyper-individualistic, heroic women who pull themselves up by their bootstraps and never need anything from anyone.
Wow, thank you. How generous of you.
Of course, there is absolutely nothing wrong with offering or occasionally needing assistance.
Jade! Hang on, Jade! I'm coming! Free yourself, Jade! I'll create a diversion!
And of course the only example you can provide is from the only game you ever truly played. Good job.
The human impulse to help others in need is certainly not a negative thing.
Then why do you keep arguing it is? Why is it so bad in your opinion for men to help women or anyone else in need? What the hell, Anita? Make up your mind!
It only becomes a problem when acts of altruism are repeatedly presented in heavily gendered ways that are bound up in harmful myths about women as perpetual victims and men as paternalistic saviors.
Well, how many times have you seen a woman carry a man twice her size out of a burning building, for example? It just doesn't happen.
As we've established, the damsel in distress is part of a long tradition of mythological narratives dating back through the ages.
That's because it used to be a reality back then. Now in our Western civilizations, men and women have equal rights, and sexism, as you portray it, is a thing of the past. Don't get me wrong though, sexism still exists in some parts of the world, and there can be horribly sexist people out there. But sexism as a social construct to hold the women down and appraise men? Well, in Saudi Arabia maybe.
But those historic roots are no excuse for the continued use of a trope that perpetuates regressive and patronizing myths about women.
It's still being used because it works, and because it's an easy excuse to make a funny joke. Like that freaking cow falling on Princess What's-Her-Name. Oh man, that's fucking hilarious. I love that one. Phew, I'm glad that's over. Let me know in the comments if you want me to go through more of Anita's videos, and if you want me to use a face cam while doing so. If you want to see the original unedited video by Anita Sarkeesian, you can find that in the description. Thank you for watching, and I hope I didn't melt your brain too much with this video. Take care, you guys. Bye.